Alright, so I recently watched Roth. Apologize for pronunciations, but the latest video at this time, essentially going through various DLC ideas for Ultimate. And it's a good video. Actually, if you don't follow Roth's, there's a lot of good Smash and general Nintendo videos on here. Very interesting deep dives and speculation and that sort of thing. And I thought I would talk about some of the DLC ideas that were brought up in the latest video, just because I think it's a fun topic and I've got some different opinions on it, I guess. So the first idea was for $1 alternate costume packs, or independent costumes. Some good points were brought up. The $1 price point was particularly brought up, yet Mii costumes are 75 cents. However, I just don't really see this as a big deal. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like not a lot of people play the Miis, and there would just be a lot more excitement for any of the other characters on the roster just about to get a new alt. Especially when it's a relatively low price point of $1. I just don't think most people are really gonna, people are gonna bring it up, but I don't think most people are gonna hold back on buying or really make a big stink about it. Although you might get some people who even defend it and are like, well, they're so used to making Mii costumes because there's a lot more in the base game. It's harder to move and do new costumes for these other characters. Who knows if that's true or not? I don't think any of us really know. But the one thing I do agree, though, is I don't think it can just be a color swap. Yeah, I think they can get away with it with some of the popular picks, like Fire Mario or Black Yoshi. But if they were to say, I'm looking at Young Link down there, a new yellow alt for Young Link, I don't think people are really going to care, especially for $1 price point. I think if you were to do that, it wouldn't need to be a set of 8 or more of them at that point. But if it's a full new costume, I know this is Young Link, but if they added Outset Island Toon Link or Conductor Toon Link, I don't think people would have a problem paying $1 for that, especially if that may even come with a couple alternative colors itself. Another point, though, I thought to bring up, and once again, what do I know? I'm not a game developer. But I do sort of wonder with this, or we're going to talk about Echoes next. If you're talking about a DLC pack, I think you might be kind of restricted based on what sort of modern assets exist. So, for example, Fire Emblem Heroes, I would love to get some of those alts in these games. There's a lot of cool ones. But there isn't a 3D model of them. They're 2D art and a little in-game sprite. Captain Falcon, another character, I've seen some cool fan renditions of his classic look from the original manual. So I feel like if you're looking to do these packs, you would use official, because there's no way in hell Nintendo, because I know there are, like I said, some fan-made 3D models for some of this stuff, but I don't think Nintendo would ever consider, making some sort of royalties or base purchase deals so that they can use them and the other person could, get the credit and some financial benefits from being the initial creator. Even if they really wanted to use one, I don't think it would ever happen, or at least anytime soon, the way they are about that sort of thing. But once again, what do I know? But I think it would be easier to, pull one of these pre-existing assets, touch it up a bit so it fits in with the style of Smash, as opposed to coming to create a new one from almost scratch. I mean, I've seen the modding community do stuff like that for years. This would just be an official way of that happening, I guess. But like I said, what do I know? Maybe it's just as easy to create something new, and it's just too much effort to sort of once again touch up the assets to have them fit in the game. Although personally, I think it would work decently well without major work, unless you're pulling from something like really old, like some of the Fire Emblem 3DS models, or if you were to try to do like a Polygon N64-esque skin. But then at the same time, maybe you can just have fun with it. Like I'm thinking of Street Fighter V with the Blanca-chan, I think was what it was called, that alt costume. It was banned from competitive play, but it was still a fun costume, especially if you're not within that play style. I know Searoth also mentioned that he thinks there would be a little backlash if, say, Pokemon didn't get any new alts and it wasn't as evenly as distributed as possible, but I don't really see that being too much of the case. I mean, yeah, it'll get brought up and some people will be upset, but once again, I just think most people would get over it and be decently understanding, although maybe I overestimate people. But I don't see it being a big thing if Mario has a lot more extra alts than everyone, and a couple popular characters just don't get any. As long as it's, relatively reasonable, obviously. If they say focus on Fire Emblem alts, then yeah, there's might be a little more backlash. I also think, too, like when we're talking about this, I think it's sort of a discussion, sort of back and forth, whether it was then or now, this stuff coming out. But I feel like even if it came out now, people would just be happy to be getting any Smash content. And how some people might even make it's just inflation argument about the costumes being more expensive than the Mii ones. So next we're going to be talking about a possible Echo Fighters pass. Searoth kind of came up with the format of 9 fighters, I believe 3 with just about everything. Someone in the regular fighter passes would get 3 that would only really be missing the stage, and 3 where it would just be the Echo Fighter for about the same price as a fighter pass, which I guess works. I honestly just don't really know what you would justify as the worth of this sort of content. I feel like as long as it's less than a unique fighter and the price of the pass sort of equivalates that, I don't think many people would have much of a problem with it. So we're going to start with the characters where it's just a character, an Echo. Funky versus Dixie is an interesting situation. I think it would just be an Echo because there hasn't been a new Donkey Kong game in a while. Unless this was our only Mario-related newcomer, maybe you can justify a stage or other stuff based on the newer games if this was it, but even then that's kind of a stretch. Donkey Kong and Mario are sort of separated enough for the most part. I'm leaning towards Funky Kong because the way I look at it is, yes, a lot of people are just going to buy the pass, but if you offer them separately, you're still going to want to try to sell them individually because there are going to be people who won't go all in. And to me, I just think Funky Kong would be more discussed and more popular and would just overall sell more than Dixie. Once again, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm reading things incorrectly, but that's the general consensus I kind of get through things. The only way I see Dixie making it in over Funky is that we have seen a pattern of past considered content making it in later, and there was some speculation, I remember at one point, that a change they made with Diddy Kong might hint that maybe Dixie was considered as an Echo at one point. I think it had something to do with a tail attack that was removed. If there's truth to that, then maybe, but to me that's just sort of really out there speculation. There's no major proof other than that. And yeah, I can easily see this, just Donkey Kong, maybe some taunts with the surfboard or a unique attack or something. I mean, I don't know, I can picture it. I'm not super familiar with the franchise. Most people seem to agree that it makes sense, so I'm just going to go with that. Next up, I have Zack from Final Fantasy. Now, I tried to sort of follow the ratio of first-party and third-party echoes based on base game, which was, I believe, 3 first-party and 2 third-party. So I think I went with 5 first party and 4 third party for this. If there was a 10th, it would have been first party, but I feel like especially with DLC, I would give that odd spot to the third party, which I think would be a bit of an easier sell. For Zack Fair, though, I mean, hopefully Nintendo and Square are still working together. That seems to be the case. They just did Mario RPG. And I don't know, Final Fantasy VII is really big, especially right now, with the second part of the remake coming out, and then there's going to be a third part, and a bunch of other stuff. Like, it's not going anywhere anytime soon, and I feel like this would be a very popular pick. I think Searoth particularly mentioned that there was no Crisis Core content, so I guess that's a possibility, but I'm just leaning more on the side of, based on how careful Smash has seemed about adding Final Fantasy content, I'm just going to go more on the side of that it might just be Zack. I do think a Kingdom Hearts Echo is also possible. I don't see it being both. I feel like it would only be one Square affiliated Echo. And I just think Zack would be easier because then you're not dealing with Disney, and I'm not super familiar with Kingdom Hearts at this point either. I think Roxas sort of has like a dual sword thing going, so I don't know if he would work. Maybe Ventus or Riku would work, but don't quote me on that. I'm not familiar enough with the series to really say for sure. So we're going to have another third party where it's just the Echo. In this one, I'm sort of using some of the logic I mentioned with the Funky Dixie Kong part about Smash tends to go back to potentially rejected concepts. And I don't know if people remember this from when there was speculation going around for Smash Ultimate about some files referencing a ponytail with Joker. And I just can't get that out of my head. I still wonder if it has to do with one of the new characters from Royal, which was coming out at that point. Violet, the big new character of that game, potentially being worked on as people were saying an alt, but in this case maybe an Echo that was dropped for whatever reason. And it's just something I could see them going back to if it was something considered, which I feel like there's more of a basis for than there is with Dixie. Dixie is just observation, where this was allegedly files within the game that sort of referenced this possibility. I haven't seen them myself or anything, but that's just what I sort of heard going around the point Joker was coming out. And once again, Persona, I mean, I just was seeing something about Sega mentioning how, you know, their big 3 franchises at this point are Persona, Like a Dragon, Yakuza, and of course Sonic. So it would make sense they would still want to push Persona. The only argument you can maybe make against it is, once again, if this is like a later thing, is if it could sort of get in the way if there is a Persona 6. And also, I know there's some spin-offs. I don't know if Violet is even in the spin-offs. So you can maybe make that argument, but I don't really think that would matter that much personally. But once again, I say this a lot. What do I know? So when it comes to Echoes that we're going to be adding content for, I feel like a big focus would be on recent releases. So I feel like Kirby and the Forgotten Land was a pretty big game for the series. You also, I think, believe, I'm not super knowledgeable about Kirby, but I think you may have had some spin-offs in between, and I see, and them remembering Return to Dreamland mentioned right here. I don't know. I know there's a connection between Galacta and Morpho Knight. I'm not exactly sure what the specifics are. I think they can maybe work together in one spot if you really wanted to. Or maybe you would just go with Galacta. Because I don't know, it's weird because then there's that alt with Meta Knight that's really similar to Galacta, but would they maybe change that? Does that really matter at this point? Would it be too weird to change up Morpho Knight's sword and give him a shield? I don't really know, and I feel like some people would also bring up the argument of this being a post Masahiro Sakurai developed character, I believe. Yeah, 2008, he would have left HAL by that point, based on first game right here. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that's as much of a factor. Like, if they introduce a really cool character they want to add, I don't think they're just going to reject it because they didn't make it. I think maybe with stages it might be a little different, especially when you might feel like you haven't even represented all the games you've been a part of, let alone the new ones, if that makes any sense, to where there's just so much to pull from. Yes, I'm absolutely serious. I think Fire Emblem would get yet another fighter. I haven't been mentioning who the Echoes are, I think, at this point. I think it's kind of obvious till now that this would be over Byleth, as I've seen people sort of bring up the idea, before Byleth even came out, of Anna utilizing all the different weapons, because she sells them throughout the series and has been portrayed in various different classes. I think it would be her Three Houses iteration. I think she would come with Engage content, but I don't think they can use Engage just because she's younger there and her model just wouldn't mesh at that point with Byleth. But I feel like this is one of those any publicity is good publicity type of moves. I don't believe this is always the case. I think if it's really extremely negative and serious, negative publicity isn't good publicity, but in this case, a lot of people are going to talk about it. People are going to be making memes, and at the end of the day, it's a character in a fighting video game. So I think like I said, you're probably going to have people boycott this one, but I think you're also going to have people buying it just to be funny. So the last Echo, without a stage, but that would come with spirits and music, would be Shadow. You have Sonic Frontiers to pull from, and a few others too. Was it Superstars? And there's that one Apple Arcade one now. This is one I'm baffled didn't happen yet. Personally, I'd prefer Tails. I think Tails would still work out. Could be more unique, but I think you can get away with mostly the same as Sonic's moveset, except maybe one or two moves and some different attributes. And I just sort of like the idea of Tails fighting Luigi and other sort of Player 2-esque characters, but rival characters are still a pretty good idea too. And Shadow's really popular, and I think he comes up a lot in this sort of discussion. So this last third-party Echo fighter, even though it comes with a stage in that, this is the one I'm a little more on the fence about. Right now, I would lead towards Devil Jin. Tekken only has the one stage. I feel like you can easily add G-Corp Helipad or maybe some Fighting Arena and throw in lots of other cameos and stuff like we got in it with King of Fighters Stadium. I don't know, I just think Tekken 8 is going to be a big game, get a decent push, so it makes sense. I think you can also make an argument. I'm not as familiar with King of Fighters, but I think Rock Howard could maybe work as a Terry Echo, and I think that's getting a new game too, and I'm sure that has plenty of other locations to potentially be used. But overall, I can sort of imagine Devil Jin working like Kazuya, except without the devil shifting mechanic. He'll just sort of be a in-between balance all the time of that sort of thing, if that makes any sense. I guess you can go with Jin and have him sort of shapeshift like Kazuya does, but I mean, maybe he learns to do that better in this new game. But from what I remember, I haven't played any of the Tekken story in a year or two, but he seems to have less control and is more conflicted about his devil form. So I feel like for potential lore reasons, it would make sense to just have Devil Jin. The last two were ones Searoth had too that makes so much sense. I mean, Octolings, Splatoon's big, Octolings are popular requests. I feel like you can easily sort of change some of their weapons to match some of newer variants and whatnot. Once again, I do remember people bringing up the argument of ink color, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I feel like you can easily, apply a tint if that's an issue, if there's not enough colors between the 16 variants. Or it would be cool to sort of unlink the color in the costume. So, for instance, the default Inkling is orange, but maybe you can select any of the characters' colors, and that would be linked consistent between Inkling and Octoling. So let's say you select purple, but the first Inkling costume, so no one can pick the first Inkling costume, but you can still pick the, I don't remember what costume the purple alt was, but you can pick that costume, but you would need to pick a different ink color, and once again, Octoling would also be restricted to not using orange, or purple, I think is what I used in the example, but hopefully that makes sense. I also just think that would be kind of a cool, unique mechanic, or maybe not mechanic, but sort of customization aspect. Dry Bowser was also mentioned. This was someone I was kind of sleeping on. I thought maybe he was better as an alt, but like Searoth said, I mean, besides changing the flame color, you can maybe make him a little more agile. He's pretty popular and recognizable, and this also gives you an opportunity to finally add a fucking Bowser's Castle stage. Holy shit, I still can't believe we don't have one. I don't know, it almost feels like the fact that it hasn't happened for so long, this almost feels too obvious, like it wouldn't happen, you know what I mean? Like if it was something on the table that it would have happened by now. But I digress. There are other good picks. Like, if it was personally up to me, this is more of a prediction as to what I personally want to see. I want to see Impa. I know Searoth had Impa on the list, but I just don't see it. It's another one of those situations where it's like they've had so many opportunities, I feel. Not so many, but enough to where it's kind of like, if they haven't done it by now, why would they do it? Especially with where you're at now, because you're going to want to promote Tears of the Kingdom. And I don't know if the older variant of Impa would work, meaning you would be using her younger variant, which would bring in confusion with Paya, her daughter, considering we've only seen young Impa in a spin-off. Unless they already know internally that there's long-term plans for Paya. Hopefully there is. I like her too, but I don't really see plans potentially that far out for whenever the next Zelda game comes up, being just casually like, oh yeah, we're probably going to have these characters in it, you know, when it's still so long away. I thought about a Pokemon rep, but then they've never gotten an Echo either. Hell, they've never been part of DLC, which is really bizarre to me. I know people have speculated that, especially with the way they are with some of the costumes, that maybe they're a little more strict and harder to work with. Maybe that's why we don't see DLC. Maybe there's some sort of holdup there. You can also maybe make an argument for an F-Zero Echo now that we have 99, but then it's like your only option is Dr. Stewart if you're particularly pushing for only the new game, unless they have an update that adds some of the later characters. And I just don't see it. I thought about Medusa. I think she might be a decent pick, but I just wasn't sure she would be popular enough for Kid Icarus unless there's a new game announced or something. I thought about Pikmin 4 too, that came out, maybe adding the Rescue Corp new character. But then that's just another weird situation where it's like they had an opportunity to maybe make Alph a little different. Maybe he uses less Pikmin, but they're more powerful. Maybe, you know, he has some rock Pikmin attacks or something that are a little different. But they didn't do that. And I know they have a little more to work with now with some of the new Pikmin from the new game. But it's like, I don't know why at this point, if you haven't already done it, why you just wouldn't maybe hold off on it for a brand new fighter for whenever the next game comes out, is at least the way I sort of feel about it. And then I sort of thought about Noah from Xenoblade, because that had a new game too. But, I mean, I'm not super familiar with... I've only played 2. I don't know if Noah would work as a Shulk Echo. I'm assuming, especially with some of the concepts I've seen around, like, maybe it could work. They've got a similar model, but I just feel like it might be a disservice that he could definitely probably be his own unique fighter. And you don't really see Smash, you know, do that a lot. Like use a major character as an Echo just to get them in when they probably should have been unique. At least as far as I'm thinking. And just other stuff, like I don't think Earthbound or Punch-Out or ARMS are relevant enough at this point to be a big seller on an Echo Pass. And then I know C-Rob also brought up Jean from Bayonetta, but once again, I just feel like, I mean, maybe if you can't get Square in, yeah, sure, throw in Jean. But or maybe if there's no truth to the Kasumi thing, but I still feel like, well, I guess this is more Platinum than Sega. I don't know, I just feel like some of these other picks would just be discussed and purchased more overall than Jean, from what I see. Although, I do like Bayonetta, and I think Jean would be a good pick. Our next topic is characters for a Fighter Pass 3. The first two characters I'm going to talk about, I believe, were the same ones C-Roth talked about, and I honestly just don't really have anything to add to it. Watch the original video for more details, but I feel like Lloyd Irving and Monster Hunter seem very likely to happen. The only thing I will say with Monster Hunter is I know people, there's like an interview or something a while ago where the creators of something said that they were hesitant about using the Monster Hunter character themselves in crossovers and that, but then there was that Marvel vs. Capcom game, and we've seen statements like that, like Ridley being too big, eventually be worked around. Admittedly, Monster Hunter just doesn't interest me for whatever reason. So this is personally one I don't really care about, but I can't deny how big of a series this seems to be right now for Capcom, and it's been a while since we've gotten a Capcom rep. We would definitely get, one or two first-party characters, and a new Zelda rep has been long overdue. I feel like just about any new Zelda character would get a lot of discussion, a lot of excitement. The way things are right now, I think Kohga is the most likely. This can change, especially as new games come out and that. But if we're looking around this time frame, Kohga is kind of connected to Sheik. So I guess with the joke of them being afraid to add anyone outside the Triforce 3, I guess you're not veering too far outside there. But the big thing for me is, once again, Tears of the Kingdom came out. You assume that they want to use some elements from that somewhere. It was a really big game. And I feel like, one of the big mechanics that you're going to want to see implemented is the crafting. And Kohga is linked to that in the game. So he could easily fit with like a crafting-based moveset from Tears of the Kingdom. I think it would be kind of interesting too, because I don't feel like he's as much on people's radars as some other choices. So for me, this just makes too much sense. Although maybe that's why it wouldn't happen. So C-Roth mentioned, is it going to be a 5-character pass or a 6-character pass? So the last 2 characters, when we go through them, if it is a 5, I would say that these 4 were the ones that I think seem the most likely. And the next 2, it's like, if it's a 5-character pass, it could go one way or another, whether it's first party or third party. And these are the ones I would cut if it was a 5-character pass. And once again, depending on their status. Crash Bandicoot right now just has an edge. So I'm thinking that you want to try to have a really exciting, popular, requested character at the end of the pass, like you had with Sora. And right now, the 2 characters I'm leaning towards are now under the same umbrella even, being Crash Bandicoot and Master Chief. Granted, I feel like there are some other choices that would definitely generate a lot of discussion. Like if Genshin ever comes out on Switch and you threw in someone from that, or Jonesy from Fortnite. Once again, not something I really want to see, but I think it would be a decently big deal. But I feel like, especially since we already have Microsoft in Smash, and once again, we're still getting not rare replay, but just rare games in general on an N64 NSO. So, they're seemingly in good standing, and they have these 2 characters that would both be just really big popular requests. Now, I would rather Crash, so maybe this is my personal bias talking, but I also feel like Crash would be just slightly more likely than Chief, just because I think Crash has a potential future on Nintendo platforms, or at least a lot more of one than Halo. Like Microsoft said, they will evaluate each game independently on what platforms would make sense to release them on. And as of this point, I feel like Nintendo's install base, there would be a lot more to gain through releasing Crash than Halo. I just feel like more people on Switch are into platformers with, you know, Mario and Kirby and all of that on there than on Xbox or first-person shooters like Halo. But once again, you're essentially bringing in one of your competitor's old mascots, and then you can kind of give the interesting story about how it started at one competitor and went to another. But like I said, this can go a number of different ways. This is just the one I think seems the most likely. So we've already touched on this character a little bit, but this is sort of, if there's, once again, only 5 and a first-party character gets cut, this is who I would cut over Master Kohga. But I know Searoth mentioned a Pokemon, and I agree that a new Pokemon would make a lot of sense. Hopefully not the final evolution grass starter. I don't care about finishing the pattern. I want something a little more interesting, in my opinion. But like I said, they're just, once again, it just feels so weird that we haven't gotten, because I think we've had new generations of Pokemon out during fighter passes or a little before fighter passes, where it would have made a lot more sense to throw in whoever over, you know, another Fire Emblem, Xenoblade, or ARMS character. So it just feels like one of those things where if it could happen, I feel like it already would have happened. It's just the way I look at it. If we're being objective and there's nothing in the way, then yeah, I would say that then that would be probably even the top choice, even over the Zelda character. I know Searoth also mentioned that we did just get Pyra and Mithra, but I honestly don't really think that really means too much. I mean, we've gotten Fire Emblem characters within relatively quick succession, so... And once again, this game's really popular. A lot of people really like it. It would round out the trilogy. My only concern would be and like I said, I'm just not familiar with the game. I've seen some moveset concepts. If they can pull it off, because I don't know, because I feel like a lot of people would want to see Noah and Mayo both together in one slot. Like I said, whether or not that can actually be accomplished, I don't know. And then that brings the question, if you're only going to go with one, I almost feel like you would rather go with Mayo because, honestly, I just think her weapon seems more interesting and unique on the roster as opposed to Noah. But once again, I don't really know what either is capable of. So once again, hopefully they would be able to be together. I mean, maybe if not, I know there was the Future Redeemed DLC. Maybe one of the new characters there could work. Actually, I think, is that one of them right there, Matthew? If you really don't want to pick between Noah and Mayo, that would be something I would do, but I don't think it would be something that would actually happen if you're being indecisive. But yeah, that's where I think it would go. And like I said, I think this is a good choice. But damn, I would also really like an Advance Wars rep, especially since that also got a new release. The final third-party pick, who, once again, if you're only going to have 5 in the fighter pass and you need to cut one of the third parties, this is the one I would cut. But Geno, as much as I would rather 2B or a honestly large number of other third-party reps, I mean, I just can't deny how long he's been requested. The fact that, particularly now, he has more relevance than he's had in a long time. And as long as Nintendo and Square keep playing nice, I feel like it's more of a matter of when, not if. Like I said, though, I feel like the other characters are a little more popular on the third-party side. And also, who knows what the future will hold. I mean, with really any of these series, but particularly with the other ones, I mean, Geno is always going to be connected to Mario and Nintendo. So, like I said, I don't know if this makes any sense, but it will always feel like a logical character to be added to a originally primarily Nintendo fighter, as opposed to, like I said, some of these other series, which are in decent standing with the Nintendo audience now, but who knows where they'll be in 5 years. Maybe I'm just looking too into it, though. And like I said, this could be a personal bias thing talking, because like I said, this character doesn't really interest me too much either, but I can't deny how much sense it would make to add him. And the final topic that was in that video was about a $50 adventure mode DLC, which I agree, that's probably the only DLC, unless you're going to have a big bundle of characters, that you can get away with pricing that high. And like everyone else, I agree, it would be super exciting. And like I said, Searoth goes into much more detail about it, so watch the original video for that. One other mild thing I wanted to bring up, though, and once again, this is just my own speculation. I don't know anything about what goes on with development in that, but obviously, the Smash team wasn't happy that the Brawl cutscenes leaked, and that's just always something that's going to happen. But then it's like, it got me thinking, like, what if the trailers all have what? Because I know that's where they even said some of the cutscene budget from Subspace Emissary went. They have, obviously the gameplay stuff, but they have, a minute or two of really cool CG interactions and stuff. I mean, I normally don't really like releasing stuff in, chunks episodically, but Nintendo's been doing that more lately. And it could kind of make sense here. Like, would it really be a big deal to have, like I said, these just little adventures? Maybe a 30-second or minute-long introduction and closing cutscene, and then that way it's not like a super big deal if it leaks. I mean, they were able to keep most of the Smash trailers a secret until they released. So if they sort of, have it one at a time and only like a little bit, not more than we would see in a trailer, would it be that big of a deal like when they show up online? Or maybe I'm missing something? I don't know. It was just something I thought I would